Welcome to Top of Search with Robin and Abe, where we talk about e-commerce, Amazon, and more.
Welcome to the Top of Search show. I am so excited for today's show because, we talk a lot about Amazon, but Google is a really important place to be advertising your products. It might be something you're looking to expand, and I have the expert for you today, and that's Jyll Saskin Gayles, and she is amazing, and she teaches people how to run Google ads. Can you talk a little bit about who you are and kind of the amazing kind of platform that you've built to help empower business owners to run things?
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. I'm Jyll Saskin Gayles. I'm a Google Ads coach, an ex-Googler. I used to work at Google for 6 years, and now I have the Inside Google Ads course, podcast, and book. So my goal is really to help Google Ads practitioners of all sizes get the best results from Google, whether you are a new business owner who just launched your Shopify store yesterday and want to run some ads, or you work for a Fortune 500 company managing the paid ads team and you're looking for help. I just really like to demystify Google Ads, taking that perspective I have as a Google insider, someone who used to work there, but then bringing that to the masses in a way that's acceptable and encouraging. I think there's a lot of fear around Google. People are scared or mistrusting. I absolutely get that. And so my goal is to teach people how to work with Google rather than fight against Google to get good results for your business.
And there's been a lot of changes with Google over the last couple of years. Even if somebody, maybe they had run an agency, a Google agency 6 years ago, they might almost have to kind of start at step one, right? Because there's been so many changes.
Change is the only constant. And it's true. I actually had someone reach out to me on Instagram over the weekend and they said, Jyll, should I take your Google Ads for Beginners course or your Inside Google Ads membership? Because a decade ago, I ran an agency and did Google Ads, but it's been a decade. And I said, I'm so sorry to say this to you. I think you need to start with beginners and then move up from there because it really changes the only constant. But that's also, at least for me, what makes it exciting to work in this industry is trying to keep up with the changes, but then interpret how to use that for my business and my clients' businesses.
And I think that there are some similarities, right? So I don't know, maybe we can start with some of the similarities that Google and Amazon have. And then, we can talk a little bit about what people need to know if they want to run ads on their own to either their own Shopify store or to Amazon.
Sure. So from my understanding, y'all are the Amazon experts, not me, but I have played around in there a bit. So a foundation of ads on either platform is really keywords, this idea of keyword targeting. People search whether on Amazon or Google or elsewhere for exactly what they're looking for. And hopefully we have the product or solution to answer that. So keywords play a role in it. We have match types around that keywords that help decide how closely the user search needs to match our keyword, though I think Google takes a broader interpretation of that than Amazon does. Bidding absolutely plays a role in both platforms with manual and automated bidding options. Audience targeting is a huge part of Google Ads. I just wrote a whole book about that, so it's a topic I know very dearly. And I know that on Amazon, because Amazon owns things like Whole Foods and Amazon Prime Video, you also have interesting audience targeting options. And then the ad formats themselves on Google, we have search ads, we have YouTube ads, we have display ads, we have Gmail ads, we have map ads, ads that can run in all kinds of different places. I don't know, on Amazon, I think there's fewer kinds of different placements, both on and off Amazon, but generally more of an on Amazon focus. So I'd say the components that go into the campaign may sound kind of similar kind of language, but the way they execute can be quite different because on Amazon ads, for the most part, you're driving towards the purchase of a product on Amazon. Whereas with Google Ads, for the most part, you're driving towards a purchase, a lead, a something that happens somewhere not on Google, on your own website or somewhere else. So that can bring some additional intricacies and difficulty.
I always tell people Amazon is a little bit like Disney's Alice in Wonderland. It looks like a butterfly, but it's actually a bread and butterfly. There's a lot of things that are named the same, but they behave just slightly different, but enough that it would change your strategy sometimes. So, and we see Amazon copying a lot of Google too. So I think even just knowing Google, because as you watch that progress, you can say, oh, look, PMAX, and then that's being successful. Look, Amazon's about to launch something very similar. And so you can kind of see where the industry is going to go,
It's true, but even something like match types, and to be fair, I actually don't know the definition of them on Amazon, but I think you also have broad, phrase, and exact match keywords. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, but on Google, an exact match keyword no longer means the user
Exact
search
match.
must exactly match your keyword. On Google, it means the user search must match the meaning or intent of the keyword, which means you could have an exact match keyword for Google Ads course and end up serving an ad to someone searching for learn AdWords, which literally has none of the same words. But today that would be considered an exact match, whereas in 2020 even it wouldn't have been.
So where does Google define broad? I mean, what you described is what Amazon calls broad. How much broader can it be for Google at that point?
Quite broad. So exact is exactly matching intent or meaning. Phrase means it must contain the same intent or meaning, but can also contain other things. And broad is just like has something to do with. And that's where actually smart bidding really comes into play with broad match keywords. Like if you have a broad match keyword, meaning have at it Google, I generally want people generally interested in the general concept of Google Ads course, you're going to get anything to do with marketing, anything to do with online learning, anything to do with Google. And so that's where the smart bidding piece on Google Ads has to come in via your conversion tracking, telling Google the thing that's important to your business. And then smart bidding, are we trying to get as many conversions as possible? Or is there a certain ROAS we're looking to hit? And then based on that, Google takes into account not just your keyword, but like the user query itself and actually millions of other signals at the time of search to figure out, bidding up, bidding down, should we bid, should we not bid, to drive results. But of course, with all things AI, it takes time to learn, it takes data to learn. So smart bidding is pretty dumb before it gets smart, especially with broad match keywords.
So broad match sounds like there really is very little connection. Like it's very likely that there's very little connection to whatever you're intending. Is there a reason somebody would want to run an ad like that? Is there a case that might illustrate where an ad type like that is useful?
Absolutely. So with the broad match keyword, just because Google can match you to a million different things, it doesn't mean they will. It's your bid strategy that helps rein that in. So in theory, you could run a brand campaign of people searching like Robin and Abe, okay, on broad match. But if you had a really restrictive bid strategy that the conversion event was they had to subscribe to the podcast, then maybe on the first week or two, you'd end up on kinds of random stuff. But like by week 3 or 4, Google would figure out, oh, I'm only going to achieve my goal if I advertise when people are literally searching Robin and Abe or Abe and Robin or Rob and Abe or something similar. So I say that to say just because it can go broad, it doesn't mean it will forever. That's where the bid strategy guides it. But an example of where this could be useful is maybe there is a new kind of search. Like now with AI overviews in Google search, searches can get really, really long. A query can have 30 words in it. A search can be an image, like Google Lens image search is really growing. And so the idea of like, unless the user types certain words in, it's not relevant to me, is becoming really outdated. And so a particular example, like maybe someone's searching for an address that is your address, but you don't have it as a keyword. And they're searching like clothing store at 123 Main Street. If you don't have broad match would figure that out. I mean, exact match might even figure that out, but there are different ways people search and broad match lets you capture that. But look, if you're just getting started, if you're a new advertiser, if you're spending less than $50 a day per campaign, broad match probably will not be the right solution for you, at least to start.
So it's more like a different way to maybe broad match is not the right descriptor. A better descriptor might be let Google figure it out. And exact match is, no, I don't want Google to figure it out. I'm the one figuring it out.
It's a good way to put it. Yeah, let Google figure it out. But even with exact match, Google is still going to do some figuring it out. There are these close variants that Google considers a close variant. We who use the English language may not consider them to be close variants.
Yeah.
There are negative keywords you can use and pair with that. But we're really all at this point where I think we all recognize as humans and as marketers and business owners that like search is changing, search is evolving. And there's two schools of thought. There's either like exact match and negative and manual and lock it down and control, which maybe that'll still work for you. It definitely worked in 2015. It maybe worked in 2020. And by 2025, it's rare for that to still drive sustainable results. And so that's why I'm like, look, automation's not perfect. Google's not perfect. It will make mistakes. And you need to roll with it and let the system learn and give it what it needs to succeed, like conversion tracking and audiences and all kinds of things we can dive into, so that Google has the best chance of driving good results for you.
I think one of the biggest differences between Amazon and Google is, and I know if you know both, you're like, duh, I know this, but if you only came from one or the other, is that on Amazon, advertising has a huge effect on organic ranking. And you don't have that with Google. You're looking for the incremental sales. So you can't be looking at, okay, I'm going to run this negative conversion to try to get ranking and then move from there, right?
That's really interesting. Yeah, Google, I mean, there's conspiracy theories about this, but like
Yes.
the algorithm that powers the organic search results and the algorithms that power ads are completely independent of each other. So pay all you want from ads, that does not directly impact, oh, look, they're an advertiser, we're going to bump up the organic. Like, no. Where they can overlap is, of course, if you're spending millions of dollars on ads, that's going to increase your brand awareness, which in turn can increase your organic ranking. But they are completely separate systems. Like, you do not need to buy Google ads to get a lot of business from Google, because there's still things like organic shopping listings. Well, those don't get a lot of traffic, but organic search listings and map listings and video, YouTube, even TikTok gets indexed on Google organically. So lots of other ways to get traffic from Google outside of ads.
And, I think that the other big thing is that, with the conversion tracking, Amazon users, we're used to having like everything set up for us. There's no plumbing, there's no technical SEO, we're just filling out forms basically compared to like what's required on like an independent site. Can you talk a little bit about why you have to have that conversion tracking set up and how you can never really optimize your Google ads if you don't have it set up correctly?
It's so true. A conversion is just the thing you want someone to do. So on Amazon, there's really one conversion. You want them to buy something. That's it. And it's all set up for you because you're running ads on Amazon to Amazon. It's all there. Let's say you have your own Shopify store or whatever provider you use, and you're running Google ads. If people click on your ads and go to your Shopify site, Google's not going to know who purchased and who didn't unless you tell it. And so the way you tell it is to set up conversion tracking. And there are so many different ways to do this. However, with a platform like Shopify, they have a built-in Google Ads integration. And many other providers have this as well. So you click a few buttons, sign into a few things, and then it's connected. And then you can choose, is it purchases you want to optimize for? Maybe if you're a brand new store, you just want to optimize for someone who's going to add to cart. Because of course you can't buy something unless you add to cart first, right? Or maybe you optimize for begin checkout. Or maybe you're not offering products at all, you're offering services. In that case, your conversion tracking may be booking an appointment, calling you, filling out a contact form, signing up for your newsletter. So a conversion can be any action on the website. But if you're an Amazon seller who's kind of moving off of Amazon, you will need to set up this conversion tracking, usually around a purchase. And then there are other things you need to think about too. For example, consent mode, those consent banners that pop up on websites and do we have permission to process your information? Like that kind of stuff you suddenly need to implement on your own website, whereas Amazon takes care of that for you. Audience building, if you want to build a remarketing list of people who have visited your website, that means you need to tell Google who the people are who visited your website and set that up, whereas on Amazon, that's built in for you. So there's a lot of these technical pipes, I think you called it, all this data that you need to connect between Google and your website so that Google can drive great results for you. And I will say, as a Google Ads coach for more than 4 years now, this is one of the core mistakes I see people make when they get started with Google Ads. They kind of set up their campaign and spend hours researching keywords and throw up their ad. Oh, I'll get to conversion tracking later. No. That's like sending someone off to run a race and not telling them where the finish line is. Like, how on earth can you run a race and do well if you don't know where the finish line is? That's like running a campaign without conversion tracking. So do not spend a penny on Google Ads, please, unless you have conversion tracking set up between your website and Google Ads.
And I think the other thing that, it can be similar in Amazon, but I don't think it's to the degree, is that there's a minimum number of conversions that you need in a period in order to be able to get results. And so that's why somebody might do the add to cart or, downloading the e-guide or clicking through something, because you might say, well, the only thing I care about is sales. But if you can't get those conversions there, you might pick a micro conversion to start to build up, correct?
Absolutely, that's correct. There's no minimum requirement in order to run ads. You could run ads for a year and have no conversions, and Google will gladly let you keep spending money. But using something like a micro conversion of add to cart or begin checkout can be helpful, because in generally smart bidding, which are any of the conversion focused bid strategies in Google Ads, work best when you have at least 30 conversions in 30 days, which shakes out to about a conversion a day. Can it work with less? Yes. I worked with one beauty skincare website, very small budget. They only got kind of 7 or 8 sales a month because that's all they can afford. So they did use smart bidding, but it took about 3 months for that smart bidding to learn and be able to consistently drive their the ROAS target they were looking for.
But like, how many sales were they making during the ramp up process? Was it like 1 or 2 sales a month and they were just putting money into it without seeing anything out, just like working on faith?
So before they ran ads, they were getting sales organically. They had some emails, some in-person events they were doing. They wanted to add Google ads into the mix. When they first launched Google ads, this business did not have the conversion tracking set up, and they just followed the Google defaults and spent a whole bunch of money and saw no sales from it. So that's where I came in. And so initially, they were getting sales, but the ROAS was below 1. So like the first month that we were using target ROAS bidding, which is the most sophisticated, smart bidding you can use in Google ads, Google ads was telling them for every dollar you put into Google ads, you got 76 cents back in revenue. And then, of course, that's just revenue, not profit. It was not profitable. And a lot of businesses would give up there. And honestly, I don't blame you. But this business owner, I guess, had faith in me and also knew like she had to get Google ads working somehow. Her business was not going to grow unless she was reaching new people. So we continued to optimize and we let it keep working. For example, initially she was advertising I think it was 120 different SKUs. And then we cut the campaign down to just have 8 SKUs in it. That's all. So focusing on a lot less so Google can learn much more around those 8 rather than trying to learn how 100 plus different SKUs work. In month 2, we got the ROAS above 1. And then in month 3, the ROAS got to around 2.8, which was profitable for her. So yes, in those first 2 months of running ads, she was losing money, but then she got to that sustainable level. And now ongoing, she's able to work with that. Come next holiday season, because this all happened in sort of like springtime, come next holiday season was really able to take advantage of that because of course, conversions go up during the holidays because conversion rate goes up, people come back. So I say, let's say, yeah, most business owners would have given up 0.76 ROAS. F this, Google ads don't work. Google ads can work if you have a website and an offer that convert. Google ads isn't magic, but assuming you have a website, you have some customers, what converts, Google ads can work, but figuring out how to get it to work, how to work with that system, how to optimize, that's the part that seems simple, but is really tricky.
If we could talk real quick too, because ROAS goals are going to be different on Google versus Amazon because we're not paying, 30% in Amazon fees. So I think it is important as people look that they look to really compare apples to apples and that you could have maybe you need a 5 ROAS on Amazon. You might only need a 3 ROAS on Google, right?
Because the fees aren't there. It's actually a really great point. The profitability works differently, shakes out differently. And of course, the trade-off when you pay those fees is that Amazon runs Google ads for you, right? So whenever you search for things on Google, you often see Amazon results there. That's part of the fees you pay. Same with a platform like Etsy. You pay these huge Etsy fees, but then Etsy takes care of the traffic for you. So even if you're not running Google Shopping ads, there are likely Google Shopping ads running to your Amazon listings right now. So moving off Amazon in a weird way, you can actually end up competing against yourself. Something to keep in mind as well.
So you've been talking a lot about conversions and how the ROAS changes over time. How much do you get involved or how much do you recommend the website owner get involved in changing their content? Do you say, okay, after a week, you're not getting any conversions or clicks, maybe change this offer or change what your webpage looks like? Or do you wait a really long time before suggesting they change things? Because on Amazon, we will look at certain metrics and we will immediately say a piece is broken and say you need to change creative. Is it clear like that with Google Ads?
I won't say it's clear, but there's definite things you can do. So for example, let's say, okay, you run ads. First week or 2, it's not converting. My first question is budget, because let's say you've been spending $20 a day and your CPCs are $5 a day. You've only been getting 4 clicks a day. It's just not soon enough to learn, right? So you will need to get, I'll put it in a click number rather than a conversion or budget number. You probably need 100 to 200 clicks to know if it's working or not, because I would say a standard kind of beginner e-commerce conversion rate might be 1 to 2%. So with 100 to 200 clicks, by that point, you would expect a couple of conversions. I'd say that's another common mistake I see people make. They'll run ads. They say, it's not working. And I look and there have been 30 clicks. And it's like, well, even with a 2% conversion rate, we wouldn't expect a purchase out of that. Now, that may not be profitable. So that's the first. Has there just been enough traffic? And then at that point, we can look at the ad metrics to determine, do we think it's an ad problem or a website problem, right? Is it we're not bringing the right people to the website, which is why they're not converting? Or we're bringing the right people and then they're not converting, which means a website issue. And so while we don't know for sure, what I recommend people look at is click-through rate. For non-brand searches, you would expect about a 5% click-through rate. If this is shopping ads, you would expect about a 1% click-through rate. So if your click-through rate is much lower than that, then that means the kind of people who are seeing your ads are not clicking on them, which in turn could mean not the right people or not the right ad creative. And you can figure that out by looking at the search terms in a shopping campaign or search campaign. So irrelevant search terms mean not the right people. Go work on that. Really relevant search terms with low click-through rate means the ad itself isn't enticing, which could be the text, the image, the price, etc. Okay, let's say click-through rate is good. We're getting good traffic to the website and it's not shaking out to conversions. That then suggests there's a website issue going on here, whether it's something like website load time or the component of the offer itself not being competitive. So that's kind of the problem solving I go through with someone who's a Google Ads expert and like shallow expertise on website optimization. I try to troubleshoot, let's at least make sure Google Ads is doing what it's supposed to do. But at the end of the day, I would say like 80% of your ROAS has to do with your website and your offer. 20% has to do with the ads.
But so you do have baseline metrics as to what the numbers should look like, and whether you get to it slow with $5 or $10 a day, or whether you get to it fast with 10x that. One way or another, you need to have a certain amount of data, but then you do have an idea what it should look like, right? It's not like that. It's not like a fuzzy amount of time. It really is an amount of actual traffic, right?
It absolutely is. And that's why it depends. And here's what it depends on. I'm not just going to say it depends, peace out. It depends. And here's what it depends on. So once you have enough data, which I would say about 100 to 200 clicks, then you know if it's converting or not. And look, sometimes the reason it's not converting is your conversion tracking is broken. The number of times that happens, right? So it could be you're getting purchases and it's not being tracked. But again, these are like the systematic things we can check. And then if it's really not converting, there's a website. And then there's that's another rabbit hole to go down with conversion rate optimization as well. But just like on Amazon, like ads bring people to the party, but then your messaging, your offer, your website needs to actually close that sale.
You know, you said something just in passing, and I think it's important to bring up because on Amazon, branded search is really important. You have to have a big defensive strategy on that because you could potentially be outranked organically for your own brand name. Can you talk a little bit about why people from a Google perspective usually don't approach kind of things with that same importance on branded search?
That's really interesting. Yeah. So I'm on Google. We often like to split our branded search from our non-brand search, or even in shopping, our branded shopping from our non-brand shopping, because they behave so differently. And I guess it is relatively inexpensive, usually, to defend your own brand, which is why for a lot of businesses, I recommend like just advertise on your brand. Those clicks are going to cost you less than $1, $2 at most. Just be there. Where it can get really expensive is if your competitors are advertising on your brand. And if you're not there, then suddenly it's cheap for them to do so. So it can be really helpful to advertise on your brand, partly as a preventative measure to discourage competitors from coming in, but also because it's so cheap to do so. But to be clear, you don't need to. You could not run ads and still show up organically very high up for your own brand. It really depends on the competitiveness of your industry. So I would say for branded search, not shopping, but search, you can expect click-through rates of like 40-ish% and CPCs usually below $1, possibly below $2. If not, there may be other things going on there. Whereas for non-brand search, you can expect click-through rates of about 5 to 7% if you're doing it well. CPCs anywhere from $2 to $200, depending on your industry and the competitiveness.
Just to pick one out of all of these, you mentioned Amazon running ads for a lot of these terms themselves. Does that mean that for an Amazon seller, if they reliably know that Amazon is running their own ads for their products, should they be investing into their own Google ad that would go to an Amazon page if Amazon is doing that themselves? Is there a thinking in which you might actually be spending too much because now you and Amazon are fighting for the same click that goes to that Amazon page? Is there like an established thinking around something like that?
It's a great question. I'm sure there is established thinking, but I don't tend to work with a lot of clients who are running Google ads to drive to their own Amazon landing page. What I will say though is you're right, like Amazon is running those ads across their entire portfolio. They're one of Google's largest advertisers globally. So I guess if I were in those shoes, what would I do based on what I do know? I probably wouldn't run Google shopping ads or performance max ads to my own Amazon listing, because a big part of that's going to be that shopping piece that's highly competitive. And I know Amazon is already there. What I would probably want to focus on from a Google Ads perspective is either text search ads, or I would get into an ad format called demand gen. This is actually the newest Google Ads campaign type, and it includes no search inventory at all. I know it's called demand gen, but it's not just for demand gen. It's a really poorly named campaign, but it's a way to run video and image ads using audience targeting. So you can run ads on YouTube, on Gmail, on Discover, on the display network if you choose, but the display network is garbage. Don't choose that. And then from an audience targeting perspective, you have Google's audiences, you have all the different remarketing audiences, you have custom segments, and then you have all the kinds of automation. And so I would see that as a really nice complement for an Amazon store, because now you're actively putting your ads in front of people who may not be aware of you, so that they might then go search for you, where they might come across you on Amazon, or they can click on it, right, and go to your Amazon listing. But this is an ad type that actually can work well for optimizing for clicks. And again, you can ensure you're getting in front of the right kinds of people who are likely to be customers for you. And it won't be duplicative against what Amazon's already doing. You're not competing against yourself, right? Because it's image and video based ads. It's much more analogous actually to running meta ads. And actually, a little insider baseball for you. When Google first created the precursor to this campaign type, the internal sales narratives that I was given insinuated strongly that this is a way for Google to come out with an ad product that would be directly competitive to meta ads and make the ad buying process on Google more closely aligned to the ad buying process on Meta. So if you're someone who has run Meta ads and has never explored demand gen, that could be a good option. And if you're someone who's on the Amazon platform, wants to spend money on ads, not quite sure how the search and shopping game is going to work, demand gen, image and video based ads on Google could be a powerful thing to try.
So you mentioned the difference between one of Google's offerings versus advertising on Meta. But to me, based on what I know of these, a Meta ad is really, really different. It's for a person who is spending time on Facebook or one of the related properties, and it's based on their activity there. How would something on Google related to Google searches be similar to something on Meta? Like, they're really different platforms in terms of how the visitor interacts with it. What would be similar?
They are and they aren't. So here's why. Meta has Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp. Google has YouTube, which is the second largest search engine, but some people would also consider that a social network. And it's the number one place people go to consume content. There's also the Discover feed, which if you're an Android user, you're very familiar with that. Apple, you may not be as familiar with that. And then there's Gmail. Like, who doesn't use Gmail in this day and age, right? So these are placements where someone is not going to search for something. They're going to spend time. They're scrolling, they're browsing, it's the time spending thing in a very similar way to Meta's platforms. Now, what's interesting is when you do your audience targeting in Google Ads for a demand gen campaign, you can target in some of the same ways you can on Meta based on interests and things like that. But you can also show ads to people based on what they have searched for on Google. It's called a custom segment in Google Ads, which is really confusing because in Meta, a custom audience is what you call remarketing. That's called something totally different in Google. But in Google Ads, a custom segment, you can put in search terms and then show ads to people who have recently searched for certain things as they're watching YouTube, checking their email, etc. So for example, when I've tried to run search ads on the keyword Google Ads course, my CPCs in the US are $20 plus. That's just not profitable for me. Okay, it's like not a game I can play. I'm priced out. But I can run a demand gen campaign to people who have searched for Google Ads course, reach those exact same people as they're doing other things online for $2 CPCs, which really does make sense for my business. And again, that's just one way you can target them. But I would say from a user perspective, whether you're on YouTube or Instagram or Discover or Facebook, there's a similar kind of behavior and expectation there. And then from a targeting perspective, there are some very overlapping capabilities. But then Google, because of its search engine, has all these additional capabilities, which I find really powerful.
I think one other thing that people who are that are Amazon native need to think about is that one of the areas where we're kind of spoiled is if we have no inventory, then Amazon will say, oh, well, we don't want to run ads if there's no inventory. You have to be much more active in managing that when you're running Google ads, right?
It's true. If you're running Google shopping ads and you go out of stock, then Google knows that because of your feed, and so won't advertise the products that are out of stock anymore. But yes, if you're running a demand gen campaign, for this mug right here and then you sell out of mugs, you got to turn that off. Though I will say you can also include a product feed in demand gen if you want. Yeah, so you gotta be a little more on top of those things. So maybe it makes more sense to advertise to a category page or to a special landing page you create for those ads that highlights your top sellers or your slow sellers you need to push, or your most profitable, that you don't need to call them that, or whatever makes most sense for your business. Or maybe more around the use case and the kind of user. Like another kind of targeting in Google is life events targeting. So maybe you want to target people who recently got married, and there's a certain product assortment there. Whereas people who recently graduated college, product assortment there. So lots of different opportunities.
Would you say somebody should do demand gen versus the shopping ads? Because I think that our ad types on Amazon are a little bit more similar. So I think that would be a helpful distinction.
Sure. So shopping ads still show up on Google search when someone's searching for something. So if there is existing demand for your product, people are searching for it on Google, and you can find that out by going to Keyword Planner in Google Ads, totally free to use. You just need to set up an account. If people are searching for your thing, then shopping ads can work really well. And although you do need to create a shopping feed to get started with shopping ads, that would probably be like the most common, the likeliest place that an Amazon seller would get started with Google Ads. Where demand gen can make sense, and I'll say the same thing with Facebook and Meta, is if your user doesn't know what they don't know, like they wouldn't search for it. An example I think of is a few years ago, all over my TikTok feed was that dancing cactus. Did you see that?
Yes.
It talks to it and it talks back. No one was searching for that, okay? But everyone who saw that visually was like, I need that. And so that can be a really great place. A more practical example, there was a business I advised who had a product that helped support breastfeeding. And so no one was searching for the name or the category of this product, but people were searching for pain while breastfeeding, how to make breastfeeding less painful. And so for those circumstances, people aren't looking for a product right away. So a shopping ad was not useful there. But something like demand gen, show it to people who are parents of infants, because you can target that way on Google, showing how this product can help support breastfeeding much more effective.
And I think all of those, I think that's really helpful. And, we talked a little bit about how somebody, if they hadn't been involved in Google for a while, they'd kind of need to start over. I think one thing that we should really talk about might be how PMAX has changed things quite a bit. Performance Max is something, how long ago? It feels like 80 years, but it also feels like 2 months.
I know, 2022.
Yes.
It changes constantly, but that's when it sort of opened up in open beta, 2022.
How would you describe, because I think sometimes people kind of oversimplify it and say, oh, it's like automatic campaigns on Amazon, but it's actually not. It's very different. And then I also had somebody say, oh, PMAX is going to replace all Google agencies or something. And, I think it's a little bit more nuanced than that, right?
So let's start with what is Performance Max. Very simply, Performance Max lets you reach all possible Google inventory out of one campaign. That's the first thing. So search, shopping, display, discovery, Gmail, YouTube, maps. I'm sure I'm missing some. You can reach all of it in one campaign type, whereas usually you would need a lot of different separate campaign types to do that. Second thing I'll say about PMAX is you do not get to choose who sees your ads. You have the option to provide an audience signal. You have the option to provide something called search themes, but ultimately Google will show your ads to whoever it thinks is most likely to achieve your objective as set by your bid strategy. So that's the second key thing about PMAX. You do not get to choose any of your targeting at all. Maybe you get to influence it, but honestly, I think Google just does that to make advertisers feel better. The third thing that I would have said about PMAX, but that's changing right now, is that PMAX has offered a lot less transparency than other campaign types. For example, up until right now, Performance Max would not show you the exact searches you showed ads on. It would show you this obscure thing called the search category report, but that's changing. Google recently announced we are getting a full search terms report in PMAX. When it first launched, PMAX would not show you asset level reporting. So how did this headline do versus that image? It used to not show it to you, but now it is showing that to you. You used to not be able to add negative keywords to PMAX. Now you can. So the third piece, PMAX used to be this black box, and I would say that has really changed now. Does it give you as much control as standard shopping or search? No, but much more kind of transparency than before. So all-in-one automated campaign type, no targeting, pretty good transparency though. And the way you guide it is through your bid strategy. And you can only use smart bidding which means you can only use a conversion-focused bid strategy, which means honestly, your conversion tracking is the most important part of running a PMAX campaign.
That's really, really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. I get asked that a lot.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot. So talking about strategy, most of my ad work has to do with Amazon. And Amazon clients are always wondering, where does Google fit into things? It sounded like you're not living so much in that Amazon world, but do you ever have to consider, or is there, again, an established strategy when it comes to brands that have their own website and also sell on Amazon? Should they ideally be running ads to one or to the other? Or even should they literally be running to both and seeing what each ad type does? Is there something you can say around that?
I've seen people do it both ways. So what I would say is if you have your own website selling your products and you want to run Google ads, drive it to your own website. Your margins are better there. Your control is better there. There is this solution you can use with your Amazon link to try to get conversion tracking. It's very complicated. And because so much of how Google ads works today is reliant on conversion tracking, I do recommend driving to your own website. What I have seen some business owners do, I'm not saying if I recommend this or not, but just want to share as an option, is you can have a landing page you use for Google ads. And then there's a button there to buy on Amazon or a button to buy direct, because some consumers just like to buy stuff on Amazon. And in that case, you could track a conversion when someone clicks to buy on Amazon. Is it perfect? No, but better than nothing. So that is something you can do. But generally, I would say if you're going to be investing the money in ads, that money's got to come from your margin somewhere. So better to have it on your own platform than on Amazon where you're going to have all those fees. But we have talked, through the episode about certain options that would be available to you, like demand gen, for example, to drive traffic directly to your Amazon store listing.
And that program she was talking about is Amazon Attribution, if you're looking for it later. And, sometimes people will be trying to drive external traffic because Amazon ads are too expensive. That might be an exception. But, in general, like 99.9% of the time, I 100% agree with Jyll. We want to take the lower ad costs and then the own traffic because you get the email and that can provide another level of profitability. So, yeah, I think that's really helpful.
It's a great point, actually. Something that I see quite a few e-commerce business owners doing successfully, whether you're doing paid or organic traffic to your own website, is figure out a way to get that email address. We haven't really talked about that today, but that personally identifiable information is so powerful. Another big part of what can drive your success in Google Ads is sharing that information with Google Ads for your own email marketing programs, etc. So one of the best ways I've seen to do that is not to just do the automatic 10% pop-up that we see on every site. No, offer something of value. I've seen quite a few e-commerce stores see success having a quiz, for example, whether it's a style quiz, choose the right toy quiz, something that's a quiz that's going to help people figure out which of your products they should buy. People often exchange their email address for that because you're giving them value. You're helping to educate them. So if you want to do your 10% pop-up, fine, but save the margin, try something that's actually going to help someone purchase from you. And it's a great way to both help them purchase and also capture that all-important email address so you own that client relationship. Google absolutely has a robust beta program. So when I worked at Google for 6 years, I worked as part of the Google Ads sales organization. And within that, I worked in large customer sales. So in Canada, where I'm located, that meant I worked with the kind of businesses who spent millions of dollars a year on Google Ads. And then in my role specifically, huge matrix organization there, I was on the international growth team. So my job was to work with Canadian-owned businesses that wanted to expand outside of Canada. Think retailers, travel companies, B2B SaaS, that sort of thing. And so I would work with them through Google's insights, which are very robust, as well as Google's ad products to expand to the US and then to Europe. And then another cool part of my job was any Google large customer sales client globally who wanted to expand to Canada, I would be brought up as like the Canada expert who would get to meet with them as well. So that was my role. I worked directly with advertisers as well as a lot of different internal teams. And at any given time, there's probably like 40 or 50 different Google Ads betas going on. Usually they are tested with like the large advertisers, which is another reason that my observation since leaving Google is that small advertisers can really struggle because so many product developments and product communications are designed with large customers in mind. But yes, new features all the time. And we have Google Marketing Live every year in late May to look forward to when Google shares all the new stuff that's coming over the next year.
One last thing, sometimes people who are leaving Amazon there to try to go build a website, it's because Amazon has made it so, we had a beauty product that Amazon changed the rules and you were no longer allowed to run ads for that. The idea that, would you say that there's people who are saying, I'm tired of having somebody interfering with my business. If I go to build a Shopify store and do Google ads, I'll be free of that. What would you say in response to that?
I'd say that's partly true. By having your own website and driving your own traffic, you are more in control of your destiny, but you are still subject to policies. There are very in-depth Google Ads policies that restrict or limit the kinds of things you can advertise. For example, I work with one client who is a therapist, and there's just certain things that she can't say in her ads. Or someone else who's like an educational institution. You'd think like, yeah, they can do whatever. No, there's like laws in place and things around that. So there are still restrictions on the Google side. And then, the Shopify side as well. Those of us who follow the news have seen certain, Shopify business owners can say inflammatory things and get kicked off the platform. So while it is much more about owning your own destiny when you have your own website and you run your own ads versus being on a platform like Amazon, there are absolutely still, I guess I'd say, laws and regulations that these platforms comply with, as well as their own policies to try to keep users safe. So definitely more control and owning your own destiny than Amazon, but it's still, you're not completely independent unless you're like hosting your website on your own servers and I don't know. Yeah.
I think one last one is that if people are just getting started on their Shopify store, they say, well, do I really need to learn all the things or can I just use the little module that's in Shopify and call that a day?
You can use the Google channel within Shopify to connect your Shopify store to Google Merchant Center and to Google Ads. So absolutely use it to do that. It'll set up your feed for you, which you need for shopping ads. It'll set up your conversion tracking, which we've talked about. It'll set up your remarketing audiences. Great. But in terms of actually running the campaigns, do not let the Google channel and Shopify just magically run your campaigns for you. It will not do a good job, or rather, if it does a good job, that will be by accident and you will be the exception, not the rule. It will just do Performance Max, which is really not the thing I'd recommend for any beginning advertiser. So use that Google channel to get Google Merchant Center and Google Ads set up, but then go into Google Ads and actually create and optimize your own campaigns. If you've never done that before, there are plenty of good resources out there. The Google Ads certifications are not one of them. Okay, that's the last thing I'll say on that. Google Ads offers these free certifications. Unfortunately, they are very out of date. I refresh mine every year to maintain Google partner status. And for fun, I keep track of how many of the questions are wrong. And the last time I did the shopping certification, half the questions were just like out of date or about things that no longer exist. So if you're looking to learn about Google Ads, of course, selfishly, I have my own Google Ads for Beginners course, but there are also amazing YouTube tutorials you can find. Reddit RPPC can be a great resource. So lots of different ways to try to learn Google Ads. Unfortunately, I can no longer recommend Google's own resources for that.
Well, I think that you've more than proved that you're an amazing resource when it comes to Google. And I'd love if you could share your course. And then even if somebody's like, oh, I'm not ready, you have an amazing TikTok where you put out great content as well. So I'd love for you to share all of that so people can follow you.
Sure. Well, if you're listening to this podcast, you're someone who listens to podcasts. So I also have a podcast called Inside Google Ads, where I share weekly episodes answering user questions about Google Ads. So that would be a great place to start if you don't want to spend money, but just want to start familiarizing yourself a little bit more with Google Ads. I'd recommend my Inside Google Ads podcast. I also have TikTok, YouTube, Instagram, Threads. I'm _Google_pro. In all of those places, I share free content every day. And then if you do want to take your learning to the next level, you can go to jyll.ca. That's Jyll.ca to check out my Google Ads for Beginners, Inside Google Ads courses, or book me for one-on-one Google Ads coaching.
Well, I want to thank you for your time. I know it's really valuable. I know you're really busy and you've given, I think, so much information for people to even say, oh, now I know where to get started, or these are the things I need to learn. So thank you so much for coming on the show. We appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Robin and Abe. It was a pleasure to meet you, Robin, in person in Germany, and really exciting to get to enter the Amazon Ads Lion's Den and share what I know about Google Ads.
And I love every conversation with you. This has been another episode of the Top of Search Show. We hope that you've enjoyed listening as much as we have recording, and we hope you have a prosperous week.
Thanks for listening to the Top of Search podcast. Have a burning question you would like answered or a topic you would like featured in a future episode? You can submit it at topofsearchshow.com. If you love the episode, subscribe and leave a review. Each month, we'll be selecting one reviewer to win a one-on-one call with your choice of Abe or Robin. Winners will be announced at the end of the first episode of every month.